When people think of prisons, they often imagine high walls, locked cells, and strict security. But in some prisons in the United States, the danger goes far beyond bars and guards. These places are known not just for holding criminals, but for their history of violence, overcrowding, isolation, and extreme conditions. One of the most infamous examples is the ADX Florence in Colorado, often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It is designed to hold the most dangerous criminals in near total isolation, where inmates spend up to 23 hours a day alone. Another historic site is Alcatraz Island in California, once a federal prison surrounded by freezing waters and strong currents, making escape nearly impossible. Although it is now a tourist site, its history still symbolizes extreme punishment and isolation. In New York, Rikers Island has become notorious for violence, overcrowding, and allegations of abuse, making it one of the most controversial jail systems in the country. Meanwhile, Quentin State Prison in California is one of the oldest prisons in the United States and has long been associated with executions, gang activity, and high-security inmates. In Louisiana, the Louisiana State Penitentiary, also known as Angola Prison, is one of the largest maximum security prisons in the country, built on a former slave plantation and known for its harsh conditions and strict control. These prisons highlight a deeper issue: the balance between punishment and rehabilitation. While security is necessary, the extreme conditions in some facilities raise questions about human rights and reform. In conclusion, America's most dangerous prisons are not just defined by the criminals inside them, but also by the environments they create, where isolation, violence, and history all collide. ADX Florence, located in Colorado, is considered one of the most dangerous and highly secured prisons in the world. It is often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies because of its strict control systems and nearly impossible escape conditions. The prison was built to hold inmates who are considered extremely dangerous, including terrorists, gang leaders, serial killers, and prisoners who have attacked guards or other inmates in regular prisons. What makes ADX Florence especially feared is its system of extreme solitary confinement. Most prisoners spend around 23 hours a day alone inside small concrete cells. Human contact is extremely limited and communication with other inmates is almost impossible. Meals are passed through small slots in steel doors, and even exercise is usually done alone in enclosed areas. The prison uses advanced surveillance technology, motion detectors, heavily armed guards, and electronically controlled doors to maintain maximum security. Every movement of inmates is carefully monitored. Because of the strict isolation, many experts and human rights organizations have raised concerns about the psychological effects on prisoners, including depression, anxiety, and mental instability. ADX Florence has housed some of America's most notorious criminals, including convicted terrorists and organized crime leaders. The prison's design focuses entirely on control and security, making it one of the toughest and most feared correctional facilities in the United States. Alcatraz Island, located in San Francisco Bay, became one of the most famous and feared prisons in American history because of its reputation as an escape-proof federal prison. Surrounded by cold water, strong ocean currents, and sharp rocky shores, the island itself acted as a natural barrier that made escape extremely difficult. The prison operated as a federal penitentiary from 1934 to 1963 and was designed to hold some of the most dangerous and uncontrollable criminals in the United States. Before becoming a prison, Alcatraz served as a military fortress and later as a military prison. When the U.S. government turned it into a maximum security federal prison, the goal was to create a place for inmates who caused serious trouble in other prisons. Many prisoners sent there were known for violence, escape attempts, organized crime activities, or repeated misconduct. The prison quickly gained a terrifying reputation because of its strict discipline, harsh living conditions, and complete isolation from the outside world. The cells in Alcatraz were small, cold, and simple, with very limited comfort. Prisoners followed strict daily routines, and breaking rules often led to severe punishment, including solitary confinement in dark isolation cells. Guards maintained tight security at all times, and the prison had armed towers, steel bars, locked gates, and constant surveillance. Inmates were given only basic rights such as food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. Everything else, including visits and privileges, had to be earned through good behavior. Alcatraz became even more famous because it housed some of America's most notorious criminals, including gangsters such as Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly. Their presence increased the prison's image as a place reserved for the most dangerous offenders in the country. One of the most talked about aspects of Alcatraz was the mystery surrounding escape attempts. Officially, no prisoner was ever confirmed to have successfully escaped and survived. The most famous escape occurred in 1962 when 3 inmates disappeared after creating fake heads and escaping through ventilation systems. Their fate remains unknown, adding to the prison's legend and mystery. The harsh conditions, high operating costs, and damage caused by salt water eventually led to the closure of Alcatraz in 1963. Today, the prison is a major historical tourist attraction, but its dark history, stories of violence, isolation, and failed escapes continue to make it one of the most legendary prisons ever built in America. Rikers Island, located in New York City, is one of the most controversial and troubled jail complexes in the United States. Unlike many prisons that hold convicted criminals for long-term sentences, Rikers Island mainly houses people awaiting trial or serving shorter sentences. Over the years, it has developed a reputation for violence, overcrowding, corruption, poor living conditions, and serious allegations of abuse involving both inmates and correctional officers. The jail complex consists of multiple facilities spread across the island and has held thousands of inmates at different times. Due to the large number of prisoners, overcrowding has been a major issue for decades. Cells often become packed beyond their intended capacity, creating stressful and unsafe living environments. Overcrowding increases tension among inmates, leading to frequent fights, gang activity, and violent incidents inside the facilities. Violence has become one of the defining features of Rikers Island. Reports have described assaults between inmates, attacks on guards, and the widespread influence of gangs inside the jail system. Many prisoners enter the facility while dealing with fear, anger, mental health problems, or addiction, which can make the environment even more unstable. Correctional officers have also faced accusations of using excessive force, physical abuse, and neglect against inmates. Another major concern at Rikers Island is the treatment of mentally ill prisoners. A significant number of inmates suffer from mental health conditions, yet the facility has often been criticized for failing to provide proper medical and psychological care. Human rights groups and legal organizations have repeatedly raised concerns about prisoners being placed in solitary confinement or unsafe situations without adequate support. The jail has also been criticized for poor sanitation, unsafe conditions, delayed medical treatment, and neglect. Former inmates and investigators have described dirty cells, broken infrastructure, limited access to health care, and an atmosphere of constant fear. Several deaths inside the facility over the years have increased public attention and calls for reform. Because of these problems, Rikers Island has become a symbol of the wider issues within the American criminal justice system. Politicians, activists, and community leaders have debated plans to close the facility entirely and replace it with smaller modern detention centers. Critics argue that the environment at Rikers often causes more harm than rehabilitation, especially for young inmates and people awaiting trial who have not yet been convicted of crimes. The history of Rikers Island reflects deep challenges involving prison management, inmate rights, public safety, and the balance between punishment and humane treatment in correctional systems. Quentin State Prison, located in California near San Francisco Bay, is one of the oldest and most well-known prisons in the United States. Established in 1852, it has played a major role in the history of the American correctional system for more than a century. The prison is widely recognized for its high-security inmates, history of executions, gang violence, and harsh prison environment. Over time, San Quentin became a symbol of both fear and controversy because of the dangerous criminals it housed and the violent incidents that occurred within its walls. One of the most significant aspects of San Quentin's history is its connection to capital punishment. For many decades, the prison served as California's main execution facility. Hundreds of inmates convicted of serious crimes, including murder, were executed there. In earlier years, executions were carried out using the gas chamber, which became infamous for its frightening and painful process. Later, lethal injection became the primary execution method. The prison's death row became the largest in the United States, holding inmates who had committed some of the most violent crimes in California's history. The presence of death row inmates created an atmosphere of intense security and constant tension. Prisoners sentenced to death were kept under strict control, separated from the general prison population. The emotional and psychological pressure inside the prison was extremely high because many inmates faced lifelong isolation or awaited execution for years, or even decades. Gang activity has also been a serious issue inside San Quentin. Various prison gangs formed powerful networks within the facility, often controlling illegal activities, intimidation, and violent conflicts. Rival gangs frequently clashed over power, territory, and influence, creating dangerous conditions for both inmates and correctional officers. Violence, stabbings, and organized attacks became part of the prison's reputation over the years. San Quentin has housed many notorious criminals, serial killers, gang leaders, and high-profile offenders. Because of this, prison authorities developed strict security systems and heavily monitored inmate movement to reduce violence and escape risks. Guards working at the prison often faced dangerous situations due to tensions between rival groups and unpredictable inmate behavior. Despite its violent reputation, San Quentin has also become known for rehabilitation and education programs aimed at helping inmates change their lives. Some prisoners have participated in educational classes, vocational training, journalism programs, and counseling sessions. The prison even launched inmate-run media projects and rehabilitation efforts designed to reduce repeat criminal behavior. However, these positive programs exist alongside the prison's darker history of executions, overcrowding, and violence. The combination of death row operations, organized gang influence, high-profile criminals, and decades of violent incidents has made San Quentin State Prison one of the most feared and historically significant prisons in America. Louisiana State Penitentiary, commonly known as Angola Prison, is one of the most famous and feared maximum security prisons in the United States. Located in Louisiana, the prison sits on more than 18,000 acres of land, making it the largest maximum security prison in America. The prison was built on the site of a former slave plantation, and its long history is deeply connected to harsh labor, strict discipline, and severe prison conditions. The nickname Angola comes from the African country from which many enslaved people were originally taken to work on the plantation land centuries ago. Even after the prison was established, inmates were required to perform difficult agricultural labor in the fields, continuing a system that many critics compared to forced labor. Prisoners worked long hours growing crops and maintaining the prison grounds under close supervision. Angola became known for housing some of the most violent and dangerous criminals in Louisiana. Many inmates were serving life sentences for serious crimes such as murder, armed robbery, and gang-related violence. Because a large number of prisoners were sentenced to life imprisonment, the prison gained the reputation of being a place where many inmates would spend the rest of their lives without hope of release. Violence and gang activity have historically been major problems inside Angola. In earlier decades, the prison was considered extremely dangerous because of inmate assaults, murders, and poor living conditions. Weak supervision and overcrowding often allowed powerful inmate groups to control parts of prison life. Corruption and abuse were also reported in the past, contributing to the prison's harsh image. Security at Angola is extremely strict. Armed guards patrol the prison grounds, watchtowers monitor inmate movement, and controlled checkpoints limit access throughout the facility. Due to the prison's enormous size, maintaining order requires constant surveillance and discipline. Escape attempts are rare because of the prison's isolated location, natural barriers, and strong security systems. One of the most controversial aspects of Angola prison has been the use of long-term solitary confinement. Some inmates spent decades isolated in small cells with limited human contact. Human rights organizations criticize these conditions, arguing that such treatment could cause severe psychological damage and mental suffering. Despite its reputation for violence and strict punishment, Angola has also introduced religious programs, educational opportunities, and work training programs aimed at rehabilitation. Some inmates participate in vocational work, faith-based programs, and prison events such as the Angola Prison Rodeo, which became widely known across the country. However, critics argue that the prison's history of violence, forced labor, racial inequality, and harsh treatment continues to overshadow these reform efforts. The prison's enormous size, dangerous inmate population, strict control systems, and historical connection to forced labor have made Angola one of the most recognized and feared prisons in the American correctional system. Many of the world's most dangerous prisons are feared not only because of physical violence, but also because of the extreme isolation and psychological pressure experienced by inmates. In several high-security prisons across the United States, authorities use strict confinement systems to control dangerous criminals, gang leaders, terrorists, and inmates considered threats to prison safety. These methods are designed to maintain order and prevent violence, but they often create severe mental and emotional stress for prisoners. One of the most common methods used in maximum security prisons is solitary confinement. In this system, inmates are locked alone in small cells for up to 22 or 23 hours a day, with very limited human interaction. The cells are often made of concrete and steel, with little natural light or outside communication. Prisoners eat alone, exercise alone, and spend most of their time separated from all social contact. The purpose of isolation is to reduce conflict, stop gang communication, and prevent attacks within the prison system. Authorities believe that separating highly dangerous inmates lowers the risk of riots, violence, escape attempts, and organized criminal activity. However, the psychological effects of long-term isolation have become a major topic of debate among medical experts, human rights organizations, and prison reform advocates. Extended isolation can lead to serious mental health problems. Prisoners in solitary confinement often experience depression, anxiety, paranoia, emotional instability, hallucinations, and difficulty concentrating. Some inmates lose the ability to communicate normally after spending years with almost no social interaction. In severe cases, psychological pressure can lead to self-harm or suicidal thoughts. The constant feeling of confinement and lack of freedom also creates emotional stress. Many inmates live under permanent surveillance, knowing that every movement is monitored by cameras and guards. The strict routines, silence, and repetitive environment can create feelings of hopelessness and mental exhaustion. For prisoners serving life sentences or death row inmates, the emotional burden becomes even greater because they may spend decades in highly restricted conditions. Some dangerous prisons intentionally use psychological control as part of their security strategy. Bright lights may remain on at night, movement is heavily restricted, and communication with family members is limited. Inmates are often denied meaningful social interaction, making daily life mentally exhausting. Critics argue that these conditions can become a form of psychological punishment beyond the original prison sentence. Human rights groups have repeatedly questioned whether extreme isolation should be used for long periods. They argue that while prisons must maintain security, prolonged psychological suffering can permanently damage inmates' mental health and reduce chances of rehabilitation. Some experts believe that prisoners exposed to years of isolation may become more unstable, aggressive, or unable to return to normal society. The debate over isolation and psychological pressure continues to shape discussions about prison reform, inmate treatment, mental health care, and the balance between security and human rights in modern correctional systems. Overcrowding and poor living conditions are among the biggest problems in many dangerous prisons around the world, especially in the United States. When prisons hold more inmates than they were originally designed for, the environment becomes tense, stressful, and difficult to control. Limited space, lack of privacy, poor sanitation, and shortages of basic resources can quickly increase frustration and anger among prisoners, leading to violence, riots, and constant unrest inside correctional facilities. In overcrowded prisons, inmates are often forced to live in cramped cells with very little personal space. In some facilities, prisoners sleep on floors, temporary beds, or in areas not intended for housing. Bathrooms, showers, and dining areas become overcrowded, creating unhealthy and uncomfortable conditions. The constant noise, lack of sleep, and crowded atmosphere place mental pressure on inmates and increase emotional stress every day. Poor prison conditions also include inadequate health care, unsanitary living spaces, damaged infrastructure, and limited access to clean water or proper ventilation. In older prisons, broken systems and neglected maintenance can create unsafe environments where disease spreads more easily and inmates struggle to meet basic hygiene needs. These conditions often increase anger and resentment among prisoners, especially when they feel ignored or mistreated by prison authorities. Overcrowding places enormous pressure on correctional officers and prison staff as well. Guards may struggle to monitor large inmate populations effectively, making it harder to prevent fights, gang activity, and illegal operations inside the prison. When there are too few staff members for too many inmates, security becomes weaker and dangerous situations can escalate very quickly. Gang activity often becomes stronger in overcrowded prisons because inmates seek protection and support from organized groups. Rival gangs compete for power, territory, and control over illegal activities such as smuggling drugs, weapons, or contraband inside the facility. These tensions can lead to stabbings, assaults, and violent confrontations that put both inmates and staff at risk. Mental health problems also become more serious in overcrowded prisons. Stress, fear, frustration, and constant exposure to violence can negatively affect inmates' emotional stability. Prisoners suffering from anxiety, depression, trauma, or addiction may receive little or no proper treatment due to limited medical resources. Without support systems, tensions continue to rise inside the prison population. Many prison riots and violent incidents throughout history have been connected to overcrowding and poor treatment. When inmates feel trapped in dangerous and hopeless conditions for long periods, frustration can build into large-scale protests, violent outbreaks, or attacks against prison authorities. In some cases, prisoners demand better food, medical care, safer conditions, or fair treatment. Experts and human rights organizations often argue that improving prison conditions can reduce violence and unrest. Better healthcare, educational opportunities, mental health support, rehabilitation programs, and reduced overcrowding may help create safer environments for both inmates and prison staff. However, overcrowding remains a major challenge in many correctional systems due to rising prison populations, strict sentencing laws, and limited prison resources. The combination of overcrowding, stress, violence, poor sanitation, and limited resources creates an unstable atmosphere where conflicts can grow rapidly, making prisons far more dangerous for everyone inside. The existence of America's most dangerous prisons has created continuous debates about justice, public safety, punishment, and rehabilitation within the criminal justice system. While many people believe that strict prisons are necessary to control violent criminals and protect society, others argue that some prison conditions are too harsh and may violate basic human rights. These debates have become more important as reports of violence, overcrowding, abuse, and psychological suffering inside prisons continue to receive public attention. Supporters of maximum security prisons believe that dangerous offenders must be kept under strict control to prevent escape attempts, gang operations, attacks on prison staff, and threats to public safety. They argue that prisons housing murderers, terrorists, serial killers, and violent gang leaders require extreme security systems to maintain order. Solitary confinement, surveillance technology, armed guards, and restricted movement are often viewed as necessary tools for preventing violence inside correctional facilities. At the same time, critics question whether some prison practices focus too much on punishment and not enough on rehabilitation. Human rights organizations, legal experts, and psychologists have raised concerns about long-term solitary confinement, poor mental health care, physical abuse, and unsafe prison environments. They argue that inmates who spend years in isolation or overcrowded facilities may suffer severe psychological damage that can make rehabilitation more difficult. The debate also includes questions about fairness and equality within the justice system. Critics point out that poor communities and minority populations are often affected more heavily by harsh sentencing laws and mass incarceration. Some believe that the prison system sometimes punishes social problems such as poverty, addiction, and mental illness instead of addressing their root causes through treatment and support programs. Rehabilitation has become another major focus in prison reform discussions. Many experts believe prisons should not only punish criminals, but also help prepare inmates to return to society as productive citizens. Educational programs, job training, counseling, substance abuse treatment, and mental health services are often presented as ways to reduce repeat criminal behavior. Some prisons have introduced rehabilitation programs that allow inmates to earn education certificates, learn vocational skills, and participate in therapy or community programs. However, opponents of softer prison policies argue that dangerous criminals should face strict consequences for serious crimes. Families of crime victims and supporters of tough sentencing laws often believe that harsh punishment serves as justice and may discourage future criminal behavior. They worry that reducing prison security or shortening sentences could place communities at greater risk. The financial cost of maintaining maximum security prisons has also become part of the national debate. Supermax facilities and high-security prisons require advanced surveillance systems, specialized staff, and expensive operations. Some policymakers argue that investing more money in education, mental health treatment, and crime prevention programs outside prisons could reduce crime rates more effectively in the long term. Media coverage, documentaries, legal investigations, and former inmate testimonies have further increased public awareness about prison conditions in America. Stories involving abuse, corruption, violence, and wrongful treatment have caused many citizens to question whether the prison system is truly achieving justice or simply creating more suffering and instability. The ongoing debate over dangerous prisons reflects larger questions about how society should balance punishment, security,